Soul Reaper against eternal darkness.
Hello everyone, welcome to What If Ichigo was summoned in Castlevania to save the world movie. Before we start, please go support Ichigo Kurosaki 679 for writing that awesome fanfic. This is the translated version I made. There will be some mistaken characters' gender, but of course Ichigo is a male. Two young high school students along with their science teacher were transported to a new world. After this they appear in front of those who truly call them two deities, one of light and the other of darkness, who ask them for help to save the world that they created and that they cannot protect, and so they are transported to this world where they will live great adventures full of fun, anger, horror, sadness and more, in which they will go through great madness. They will meet many people, friends, girlfriends and more. What awaits us in this adventure? Stay to see it. Chapter 1: The beginning of a new life. Darkness, it was the only thing that could be seen apart from a dim light in the center of said darkness, the light of a simple flame that dimly revealed on the stone floor a huge circle with doodles painted in white ash. Surrounding it could be seen more than 7 men in large robes. "Let us begin the sacred invocation rite," said one of them. His voice was hoarse and weak like that of an old man. He himself raised his arms towards the others. "We will give our lives to invoke two beings with enormous power, as the legend of the heroes of antiquity tells." The other men settled at each point in the circle and likewise raised their arms, while the flame in the center slowly went out, leaving the entire room in darkness. The first elder cleared his throat as he sighed. "Aka boner dud av, drem du lenukfa." The elder recited in an ancient language followed by his other companions. The bodies of the elders began to release a blue and red energy, which was imbued into the circle, which now glowed a bright pink. "It works, let's continue, don't lose your concentration," shouted the head elder, while the power of everyone present began to unite, swirling around the circle. Gof grand run of Energenesager Kieselalen. In the center of it, a huge ball of darkness began to form like a black hole. Lightning began to be released from the black hole like an uncontrolled electrical storm, which was causing everything to tremble with great force and magnitude. All the elders were impressed, cheering with excitement inside, but still maintaining their concentration. "Hold your position, we must finish." Everyone in this world must have already felt this enormous power emanating from the spell. There is no turning back. The Demon King must be defeated, and they are the only salvation of this world. "Our lives are just a small price to pay," shouted the old man, letting go of his companion's hands. They followed him in the same way, and thus the barrier of his energy was destroyed, releasing the black hole, which shot out like a great explosion, consuming everything around it, disintegrating the elders and everything that was nearby. Outside the room where we were before. Here we can see an ancient and enormous castle which in seconds was destroyed by a huge ball of destruction and darkness, and out of nowhere it shot into the sky like a huge ray, destroying everything in its path as it grew more and more, wiping out everything in its vicinity. Our view had now changed. Year 2022. Now we can see an ordinary great Japanese academy in plain sight, focusing our sight more on two young people who were paying full and focused attention to the explanation of the class by being very diligent, and well, that's it. On one side was a young man with orange hair sprawled in his seat, sleeping while drooling like a corpse, not paying attention to his surroundings. And on the other side, there was a long-haired, raven-haired man with a red band adorning his forehead. He was close to falling into unconsciousness as his eyes slowly fell. "Gabriel Belmont, this is not your house," called the teacher, slamming a newspaper against a black-haired boy's head, smashing it against the table, and turned to the chair next to him. "Same to you, Ichigo Kurosaki, this is not your house for you to be sleeping," and he had also smashed the newspaper against the orange-haired boy's head. The one recognized as Gabriel Belmont was looking at the teacher with a completely irritated face while raising his face. "It's not my fault that this is not even good for going to the bathroom." The one next to him, now known as Ichigo, had only choked on his saliva, suddenly getting up. "Who was the asshole who hit me?" He growled angrily, but upon seeing the teacher he just rolled his eyes. "Ah, it's the virgin." The professor just sighed in irritation. He was already used to this same scene every day and just grabbed Ichigo and Gabriel by their ears, dragging them. "I also appreciate you two very much, but now get out of my class," he said, kicking them in the butt, taking them out of the classroom and closing the door behind him. Getting up and brushing off a little dust while looking into the living room. "How much does he need a wife?" he would say while lazily scratching the back of his neck, the truth being that if it were up to him, he wouldn't even be in class. Family matters and other things that he had to attend to, and that often took up a lot of time even from sleeping. Ichigo had 2 large black bags under his eyes as a sign of sleepiness. He just got up sighing. "What he needs is for at least a guy to buck him, but whatever, now what are we going to do?" he said, running his hand through his long orange hair. The dark-haired man looked at him and then slapped himself to wake up, also having an instant idea. Let's meet here for a coffee or something that makes us see another dimension after all. Here they don't give a damn if we live or not, he would say, showing that he had taken out the suitcases in a way that the old man hadn't even noticed. The orange-haired young man thought for a second. Let's go, like in an isekai of an anime. I think it's one of the best ideas that could happen to us, but that only happens in anime, he said, stretching a little. Oh, could you help me as usual, called a voice from behind them, placing his hands on the shoulders of the two boys, revealing a man of maybe 35 years old with blonde hair down to his shoulders. He was wearing a white coat like that of a scientist. Ichigo with his eyes rolled back. Hello mad scientist, what experiments do you have in mind now? Knowing that the result always ends in an explosion, he answered as if it were already customary. Hatter, talk about what's the madness of the day? He asked with his arms crossed, raising his eyebrow at the man in the hat. For Jehovah's sake, tell me this time a lethal virus isn't involved. The Hatter had a chibi look while laughing, nervously hiding some papers. No, of course not, I learned last time, he said, nervously looking away. Ahem, anyway, I have the definitive idea, a machine that stands time free. He yelled, trying to give more emotion to the stupidity he had said. The orange-haired man blinked his eyes. Kisukirahara, of all the stupid things I've heard you say, this is the one that far surpasses the Terminator that almost killed half of Japan, he replied. The Raven, on the other hand, being less realistic than Ichigo, was in his world with a cloud of thoughts over his head, which still showed a chibi Gabriel, paralyzing time left and right, getting into wherever he wanted. Gabriel in reality felt a slight blush of perversion, laughing a little and then returning to reality, shaking his head. Yes, what the strawberry said. What did you say, by the way? He whispered the last thing into Ichigo's ear, not paying attention to what he had mentioned. Ichigo just sighed, pinching the bridge of his nose. Forget it. It won't work anyway and he'll end up exploding, he said, putting his hands in his pockets, and as always, we'll be there because in the end, it's the only fun thing in this miserable world. Urahara smiled with amusement, looking at both of them. This time it will work, I assure you, and we will be able to do much more than you imagine, Gabriel, he said, now with a smile and perverted blush on his face. You better be, old man, I'm running out of good material, and I don't have enough money anymore, the dark-haired man would say, only interested in that, despite the fact that on the outside, he is more antisocial and introverted than shit, but hey, he was an otaku with no social life, so he was within his rights. The orange-haired man shook his head. Anyway, we'll see what happens, and don't get your hopes up, Gabriel. I already lost it since the invisibility cloak that gave us more visibility, and that's why we spent a month in the hospital from the beating the kendo club gave us, he said, with his eyes rolled back in his head, remembering Vietnam. Urahara smiled nervously. A simple miscalculation, it won't happen again, he said, laughing as he took out some very detailed plans of the machine. Whatever happens, this won't fail, I assure you. Looking at Urahara and then at Ichigo, shrugging his shoulders disinterestedly. Whoever is afraid of dying, don't be born, say so, I have nothing to lose, the black-haired man replied disinterestedly, now paying little attention to that new project. Come on, stop making such long faces, and let's go to the Batcave, said the Hatter with his very typical stupidity, starting to run as if he were a bartender. Ichigo scratched his head. Meh, one of these days we'll die because of him, but at least this is more interesting than being there in class, he said, and began to calmly follow the mad scientist. Gabriel nodding at the orange-haired man's words as he followed the Mad Hatter. If that thing really works, then the first stop will be your cousin's room, he would say, running away. Son of a, he growled and started chasing the black-haired boy. Hisuk Laboratorio. And so the trio retreated to Urahara's laboratory, or the Cave of Virgins as others usually say. Cave of the Virgins. The automatic door opened, releasing steam as the lights turned on by themselves, revealing the interior of the laboratory. The trio entered as usual, passing by certain parts of the laboratory where there were black carbon stains from the explosion, revealing that there were more than 60 failed experiments. Urahara is guiding the duo to where they were going to begin the creation of the machine. Okay, my young assistants, let's start with a machine to spy on girls in the bathrooms, he said in a chibi way with a screwdriver in his hand. Ichigo understanding what he was saying, so we start making your stupidity while you sit in that chair to say that you are helping. Okay, the usual, he grunted, shaking his head. Young Gabriel was already leaving when he saw his intentions. Suck it, Hatter. The black-haired man would say as he was already at the door. Urahara had a large folder in his hands and cleared his throat. Are you sure you're going? I have a big reward here, he said, giving her a small glimpse of the lewd material he had gotten from his most reliable sources. If it's yaoi rag or some kind of blowjob, I swear I'll cut off your dick and have you throw it to the crocodiles, Gabriel would say, coming back with a bored look. The Hatter just left her with the table. It's from your favorite author, he made a lot of exclusive material for you, he said calmly. Ichigo for his part just scratched his head, wax, then we share the let's start with this thing before I get bored, he said, starting to assemble the machine. Gabriel nodding to Ichigo, starting with the construction of the blessed machine being supervised by Urahara, which was what they feared the most because whatever he does without an explosion, disaster or calamity on average, is not a job registered by the Mad Hatter, spending time giving the final touches to the machine. Okay, what do you say, Strawberry? Gabriel questioned, observing the machine they had created. The orange-haired man had his arms crossed, analyzing his creation. It's going to end up exploding, so what more can I say? The Hatter rolled his eyes. Hey. Have a little more trust in me, I bet you it will work very well, he said standing in front of the two. Well, what if we try it to shut them both up, he squealed with excitement like a child with a new toy. I hope at least he sends us flying to Russia, they say there is payment for having children, I whisper in Ichigo's ear, looking expectantly at Urahara. Really? Why the hell didn't you tell me that before, the orange-haired boy replied in a low voice. But all future talk was stopped by Kisuke, who had already pressed the start button, and the noise began to be heard as if a combustion engine was starting, and below the three of them a red and blue energy began to be released surrounding them like a dome, and out of nowhere it began to shake. Ichigo, for his part, rolled his eyes. Yep, we're going to be a pain in the ass this time, he said as he tried to stay standing due to the strong shaking. Gabriel swallowed hard, looking at Kisuke, grabbing him by the neck and starting to strangle him. You bucking mother, understood me, you're bucking mother, Kisuke. He growled, entering into comical panic while he choked the Hatter like a cartoon. You see, guys, I told you so. This wasn't a good idea. We're going to die. He now began to blame the two of them while screaming like crazy. Ichigo turned to Urahara. Now it's our fault, you cheap scientist. You better watch how you pay for this stupidity before we die like three idiots because of you, he growled, sweating profusely as he tried to stay calm. And just like that, a huge light consumed the trio, blinding them, almost leaving them blind or with future vision problems. The strong light had disappeared as well as the shaking and the noise of the machine. Everything was silent, there was not even the slightest hint of noise. I can't see a thing in my eyes, groaned young Kurosaki, rubbing his eyes that only saw white. On the other hand, the dark-haired man was clutching his eyes while trembling, his head glued to the ground, bucking hell. He screamed while trying to open his eyes, but the light forced him to close them instantly, screaming as he felt as if fire had fallen on his eyes. The Hatter just took off his dark glasses. Meh, it's not that big a deal, don't be crybabies, look, my machine that I created and put together all by myself actually works. We're stuck in time, wahahaha, he said, laughing like a villain, now observing in detail his supposed great feat. Buck off, Kisuke, the orange-haired man growled, starting to open his eyes a little more, but he still couldn't see a thing. The Belmont covered his eyes for a moment, creating some shade, slightly opening his eyes, looking blurry, but little by little they were clearing up. Where and what the hell are we doing here? The mad scientist looking around. We are still in my laboratory, but we are covered by this strange dome. Deactivate it to see what happens, he said, and turned to touch the machine before the duo tried to stop him. Out of nowhere the blue and red energy that covered them suddenly vanished. The center of the machine began to release a dark energy which swirled while rays of darkness came out of it, beginning to grow more and more, dragging everything that was in the laboratory, absorbing it. Kisuke had already disappeared, hiding behind some boxes far away. While with the other two, Ichigo had his eyes rolled back. Don't tell me we created a bucking black hole, I'm a dick in it. He shouted, now sweating harder because of the black hole that was in front of them, dragging them little by little. Unable to believe what they were seeing, a black hole, it was a bucking black hole that was in front of them. Gabriel couldn't react, he couldn't think straight, he was in shock, he was perplexed, his mind completely shut down at what was in front of him. It was impossible, physically it was impossible, but here in front of him was proof that it wasn't, and now he was fearing for his life, trying to get away from the gravitational field, but his strength was in vain. Shit. The hole kept growing and its strength increased with its eyes. It was already at the point where it was pulling large, heavy cabinets. Now with its strength it was pulling the trio. They could do nothing to stop it. There was no way out. There was no way the three of them could avoid being absorbed by that so-called failed experiment. Kisuke was shaking Ichigo and Gabriel with his stupidity. I'm getting sick. We're going to die, Ichigo. Gabriel. I'm going to faint, support me. He screamed, terrified in a comical way. Young Ichigo on the other hand was helpless and annoyed. It drives me crazy, only I would think of following Kisuke's stupidity. Now we're going to get what brought us. He growled, irritated and scared that even his hands were shaking from the fear he was going through. For his part, Gabriel was in a trance, or rather, he was in complete shock. It was as if time had stopped for him, as if what he was experiencing was a bad movie. He felt a sea of sensations at this very moment, such as Helplessness, rage, anger, sadness, he couldn't think clearly since at this very moment he knew only one thing, and that was that there was no off button or lever, and only God knows where they will end up at this moment, and that is what had him terrified. What will become of us? Darkness began to consume the trio as they went deeper into the immense hole against their will. They had left their world, their loved ones and everything they knew behind after being sucked in. World of darkness. They could no longer see anything, they could not feel, they could not hear anything, not even their own breathing. They had lost all their senses while floating in nothingness without any predisposed direction, only what they imagined as the end of the road, death. A strong light began to appear among all the darkness, slowly taking the form of a large woman dressed in tight white with an open V-shaped neckline, accompanied by a cross design under her large chest, decorated with multiple decorations on the chest area and its edges, as well as having gauntlets on both hands, accompanied by about 7 wings as large as her of that same color. She looked like an angel, or a goddess. Better said, something indescribable. Next to her was a dark silhouette of the same size. This one was almost indescribable because it camouflaged itself too much with a world without light. The only thing that could be denoted was its robust figure, on its head accompanied by 2 long horns, bright golden eyes, and a long white beard. More of that was impossible to see. Children of darkness and light, the goddess called, addressing the 3 of them in a firm, yet kind and sweet voice. Beings from another world, called and forced to come against their will for a banal purpose. Now the other being spoke with a colder and hoarser voice, or rather like that of a terrifying demon. The trio wandering through the darkness on their journey had been held back by some kind of strange force, which began to draw them towards what appeared to be 2 deities. The old hatter just kept quiet, not that he could utter a word, but his usual conical manner had disappeared into a serious frown. On the other hand, there was the young man with orange hair, who was looking at both of them with distrust. The woman gave him calm and peace, while the man alerted and frightened him. That's why he didn't feel calm with a cold look that hid his fear, while his mind was going 1,000 miles an hour, thinking of some way to escape. He, for his part, had a lost look despite looking at them, completely out of the reality that was happening right now in front of them. Despite the supposed deities that stood before them, his mind and thoughts were still in another dimension, trying to assimilate well what had happened until now, since of the 3, he was the only one who was apparently still affected. The woman of light, noticing the state of the trio, sighed, turning slightly to see her dark counterpart. I told you to look prettier and not so aggressive, you've already scared them, she murmured with a slightly annoyed tone in her beautiful voice. The man of darkness likewise turned slightly towards her. I already told you that I'm not good at this, it's not my fault, and it's not like this is something usual for them, he said in a more realistic way, and with a bored but still frightening tone. Both beings took a breath and then sighed to stay calm before they started fighting. They returned their gazes towards the 3 humans. Where was I going? She spoke to herself while thinking, yes, children of darkness and light, you have been summoned to this world for a greater good. You were chosen among 1 billion for the survival of this world and its inhabitants, she told them with her angelic voice, which with her simple presence, gave peace to the 3. You were called selfishly, dragging you here for the survival of those who dwell in this sad and selfish world. You among many, have a perfect connection and were selected from the day of your birth to fulfill the purpose of freeing this banal world from chaos and death, added the dark being, as he now obscured the peace and sent fear through their bodies. The hatter wanted to back away from every word the being gave. Am I trembling? I'm afraid just to see him, no. I'm afraid just to feel his simple presence. I can't speak, my mouth is as if it were sealed by that fear, he said internally, trembling with a terrified look. Gabriel laughed softly and little by little, he could be heard raising his voice, while he brought a hand to his face. Fear was something that partly ignited a hint of madness that lay in his mind. What stupid things are you saying, the orange-haired man reproached in a tone that tried to be strong, but fear succumbed in his words. His eyes were covered by his bangs, but they were still more or less visible. They reflected anger, fear and helplessness, that we were summoned. That we were chosen since our birth. Stop saying stupid things. Why the hell do you keep babbling stupidities instead of returning us home? Both deities remained silent for a few seconds, then attracted the trio towards them. None could resist, it was like telekinesis, a very powerful one. Our children, we beg your forgiveness, but we cannot return you home. You have to help our little ones before they are destroyed. We beg you to lend us your help, said the woman of light now in a more brittle and fragile tone. The dark being, trying to be calmer, answered them. Our world was ravaged by a being from another world with a power that surpasses anything ever seen before, and we cannot intervene on our own. This being appears out of nowhere and began to cause death and destruction among our children. That is why we have used this sacred right to summon you. The black-haired man raised his gaze slowly, his eyes were dull, lifeless, it didn't seem like he even had a soul, it was as if his eyes had been clouded by darkness. That's not our problem, it's not our world, and neither are they our responsibility. Do you want a hero? Someone to defeat him? Why don't you make someone from your world be born with special abilities that can be developed over time, ones that allow them to defeat that being that you fear so much, he would say with a dry voice, without any kind of emotion present, they were only empty words coming out of an empty body. Beings like you who claim to know everything, to do everything, to think about everything, why do you have to involve external people in your problems? He cared little or nothing about anything, he had already lost everything, he had absolutely nothing left to be feeling anything about. He died or lived, it didn't matter to him anymore. Isuke for his part shook his head, and what would we gain by helping you? He said in his cold tone, trying not to be afraid enough to speak, besides, we are simple humans, what will we do against someone you cannot defeat? The orange-haired man just sighed, trying to calm down. He remained silent, observing them while analyzing them with his simple gaze and a stoic, strong face. The being of darkness spoke again, it is our only solution, and as you said, we know everything and we know everything, but even so our beings, no matter how strong and powerful they may be, have limits, and this being surpasses all existing limits. That's why we call them. How will you fight them? It's simple, you will obtain our raw power so you can fight darkness and light, both powers in your bodies, everything will depend on how much effort you put in, and in the end you will obtain a great reward, said the goddess returning to her initial tone. Ichigo sighed with his eyes closed, okay, we really have no other choice, but to do this, they can't send us back, nor can we do much more than accept, it's the only rational and realistic decision we can make to win our ticket back home. He opened his eyes with decision and a resolution taken from the soul. Very well, let's end this spectacle once and for all, and start with the show. The Hatter didn't know what to argue with the orange-haired man's decision, he was right in what he said, no matter how much they continued talking their situation wouldn't change. Well, there's no other choice, he replied, still annoyed. For his part, Gabriel remained silent with dull eyes, only nodding his head to show that he was part of this journey. The two superior beings nodded, the decision was already made, they raised their hands pointing at them speaking in unison, we will give you our raw power, it depends on you how strong you will become, and we will help you as much as possible from here, I hope you have a great trip, and goodbye. The palms of both beings began to light up, the deity of light had a large ball of blue energy in his hand, while the dark deity possessed a large ball of red light, and so they shot at the duo colliding with them, reaping the light had blinded them, and they began to feel their bodies being impregnated by the strong energies, while they slowly fell into the threshold of unconsciousness. New world. That new world was very similar to the one they came from, only because of the big difference that this one was in a medieval time, and also because of those floating islands that were seen all over the land, but what mattered most was the enormous kingdom that lay in that place. In the sky, a crack opened in space-time, and out of nowhere, a powerful red and blue ray was released which shot towards the center of the city. End. Characters so far in brief description. Unimportant teacher. Age. 35. Height. 1.79. Status. Alive. Race. Human. Peso. 80 kilograms. Physique. A normal Japanese man, 1.79, with short black hair, light skin, tired black eyes with dark circles covered by strange glasses. His clothing is simple. A long-sleeved white shirt with a blue tie with white stripes that highlights his deplorable physique. On his lower half, he has black pants and matching shoes. Isuke Urahara. Age. 35. Height. 1.89. Status. Alive. Race. Human. Peso. 70 kilograms. Physical. A middle-aged man, shoulder-length blonde hair, almost lifeless chocolate brown eyes, paler skin from not sunbathing, on his head, a green and white striped bucket-shaped hat, his clothing consisting of a typical teacher's white shirt with a purple tie, accompanied by a white doctor-scientist coat. Behind these clothes, the thin but slightly muscular body of the apparent scientist was slightly hidden, in his lower part, black dress pants with matching black shoes. Gabriel Belmont. Age. 17. Height. 1.84. Status. Alive. Race. Human. Peso. 68 kilograms. Physical. 17-year-old boy with long jet black hair reaching his shoulders, with a red band on his forehead, red eyes and white skin, normal student clothes, white shirt covered by a blue coat typical of Japanese students, which does not show his thin but quite defined and muscular physique, seeing at the bottom a pair of black pants with matching black shoes. Ichigo Kurosaki. Age. 17. Height. 1.82. Status. Alive. Race. Human. Weight. 66 kilograms. Physical. A somewhat ordinary 17-year-old boy, somewhat long orange hair, chocolate-colored eyes, light skin with ordinary student clothes, a white shirt covered by a blue coat typical of Japanese students, revealing a bit of his thin but muscular and well-toned body, but nothing ostentatious, below light black pants, combined with matching black shoes. Izos. Age. Height. Race. Gods of creation. Goddess of light. A large woman dressed in tight white with an open V-shaped neckline, accompanied by a cross design under her large chest decorated with multiple decorations in the chest area and its edges, as well as having gauntlets on both hands, accompanied by about 7 wings as large as her of that same color. She looked like an angel, or goddess. God of darkness. Dark being of the same size, this one was almost indescribable because it camouflages itself too much with the world without light. The only thing that could be denoted was its robust figure, on its head accompanied by 2 long horns, bright golden eyes, and a long white beard. More of that was impossible to see. Chapter 2 A New World. Adventurers and adventurers of the kingdom, you have been gathered here in the presence of the statue in honor of our goddess Aqua-sama, by order of our king Eterbino Octavo exclaimed, the spokesman to the great crowd of adventurers, mercenaries, royal knights and others who gathered in the center of the great kingdom, waiting to hear the words of their rulers. Looking a little closer at the sky, between a large group of clouds, a few electrical discharges were discreetly released, just as a few cracks could be noticed in space-time, as if reality were cracking. Returning to the city center. Those present were still gathered waiting for the king and queen. They were walking at a calm and relaxed pace towards the center of the spectacle. The apparent king took a step forward, attracting everyone's attention, revealing himself as a man of almost 60 years old with a long white beard, red eyes and a deplorable body covered by his gala robes. Behind him was a beautiful woman with purple hair. Her age was much younger than the king's. She could have been between 35 and 39 years old, very well endowed and striking, despite her loose and elegant clothes, obviously typical of a queen. Ahem. The old man cleared his throat as he looked at everyone. First of all, your king thanks you for your presence, that is, I, the king, yes. That same one, ahem. I have gathered you here in view of the very high activity of demon spies sent by the one they call the king of demons. I think many have noticed this due to the high increase in the murders of innocent people from the High Council of Elders and Sages, as well as the recent death or rather the elimination of the old man's temple. If I as king went there and saw him, ahem. I, the king, the man expressed in an elegant but presumptuous manner as he looked at everyone. He apparently had the bad habit of emphasizing that he was the king. The woman behind him sighed, covering half of her face with a fan in embarrassment at her husband's very ostentatious and embarrassing performance in front of everyone. Please just get to the point, dear, the beautiful woman said in a low voice. Ah. Yes, I'm coming, my queen, he said in a sweet way, looking at her with hearts in his eyes. Ahem. As I was saying, what was I saying? Yes, well, I was in the bathroom a few days ago, and I found it. The spokesman jumped in front of the king, quickly interrupting what he was going to say. Ahem. All adventurers, mercenaries and others are asked to offer us their help, forming patrols with their teams, or joining the defenses of the wall, so that we are not such easy targets before this evil king, to maintain peace and tranquility, as our powerful goddess Aqua gave us, he said, sweating slightly before those present, with a slight nervous tone in his voice. While all this was happening, a small noise began to resonate in the city. This same noise was like an annoying beep, which began to increase to destructive levels for the eardrums of the people present, and even for the other inhabitants. The earth began to tremble, resonating throughout the kingdom. The lightning coming out of that area and the sky began to increase, and out of nowhere a huge hole opened in the sky. Inside it there was only darkness and silence apart from the lightning coming out of it. The earthquake and the noise were getting louder and louder, as if something was approaching them at great speed, and from what they could see it was coming from that hole which was creating havoc in the kingdom. Suddenly a beam of light shot out, heading at high speed towards the center of the city. The queen, seeing this, raised her hands and materialized a powerful shield of ice that covered her and the spokesman along with the adventurers except her husband. And out of nowhere the powerful lightning crashed into the center of the city, creating a shock wave, causing everyone to retreat slightly. When it hit the ground, it also created a powerful white light that blinded many. That blinding light had ceased. In the center 3 human individuals could be seen with strange clothes, never seen by the inhabitants of this world. 2 of them were on top of what was the king of the city, trampling him entirely. I want to throw up, cried the first one, revealing himself as Kisu Kurihara, who out of nowhere began to vomit at the old man's feet. On the other hand, on top of the old man's back was Ichigo with a more elegant pose, and with his hands behind his back. What a damn pose, what a damn flow I have, he muttered quietly under his breath. He just had to get used to this, and try not to worry so much about what happened with the deities, so as not to suffer a collapse. The red-eyed raven was squatting on the king's head, looking around with empty but analytical eyes. Thanks to that, he was able to see how the spectators' attention was focused on them, but not exactly for them. They seemed to have a shocked and completely stupefied look, practically as if the whole world was witnessing an irremediable and grotesque act. Wow, it seems the welcoming committee is going to skip us this time. Among the servants who were part of the group of royal maids, a white hair stood out from the rest. She was dressed in an elegant white dress adorned in the European style, with sapphire blue eyes and delicate features. From her hands to her elbows, she had a kind of knight's armor, but around her neck was a necklace with a chain. The same girl with an unknown name looked at this with a serious and analytical expression, not being a victim of shock. The orange-haired man, leaving aside his supposed flow, turned around monotonously to see those present. Hello," he said, raising his hand in a somewhat nervous greeting, observing them all, slightly capturing two people of his interest. On the one hand, a young knight in golden armor and chocolate hair. This gave him an air of mastery, and on the other hand, he was smitten with that young woman with white hair. "She's beautiful," he said with his gaze fixed on her. The white-haired girl fixed her gaze on Ichigo. Instantly an enormous invisible pressure was present between the two, the origin being the girl herself who knew two things. One of them is that they were being attacked, and the other, "You murderers have just committed murder against the king, something unheard of, and the punishment is death," exclaimed the girl with a voice as cold as ice, raising her hand slowly. Apparently, she was not a simple maid. Next to the white-haired girl, a young knight with grayish hair tied in a ponytail appeared. Her eyes were a hazel color, and she was wearing a large, somewhat masculine armor, her femininity only being noticeable by her thin face and curvy body. "Very well, then let's begin with the sentence," she said, slowly unsheathing her sword with a firm voice that was almost no longer feminine. The black-haired man's hesitant gaze ended up focusing on the knight in robust armor. He didn't know how, nor why, but with just one look at the woman, a certain interest awoke within him, especially because of the fact that she showed an attitude and character that he had never been able to see or notice in a woman. Something that made him smile slightly despite her previous expression. "Okay, I guess we'll go straight to the dance floor," Gabriel exclaimed, sweating slightly, since this would be a real mess, but not for the group of three. Kasuke was poking the old man with a stick, noticing that he was breathing. But this one is more alive," he said, separating Ichigo and Gabriel from the old man. "Look, he's breathing." Everyone's gaze focused on the man lying on the ground. Suddenly he opened his eyes as if he was waking up from a nightmare. "Ah! What happened? What happened?" he shouted, upset, looking around observing the trio. "And you guys?" he said in a scared tone like that of an idiot. Kasuke got up from the ground with his hands open as if it were a show, and voila. "Magic ready, the king is alive, we leave peacefully and act as if nothing happened here," he said in a chibi way, taking a step back. Next to him, Ichigo cleared his throat following the show. "Ahem. That's right, here it is as good as new, it couldn't have a better back," complete with his eyes rolled back and sweating slightly. The dark-haired man sighed heavily, raising 3 fingers of his hand, in 3, 2, 1, lowering a finger each time he counted backwards. He looked in the direction of the two newly arrived women. The young white-haired girl raised her hand. "Under the royal order of the Lion's Kingdom, you 3 intruders will be detained and subsequently convicted of attempted murder and being suspected of being spies for the Demon King," she said firmly as she moved her hand, creating a light blue magic circle with various patterns, causing all the exits of the Colosseum next to the roof to be completely sealed by a kind of barrier or field of light blue energy that gave off a shuddering cold air. Gabriel returned to see the king. "Well," he said with disinterest for a moment and then looked around. Peace was never an option after all. The orange-haired man shook his head. Something clicked when he heard the woman's words. "Wait a second, if I heard correctly, you said king of the demons, aren't you?" he questioned, taking a step forward, observing the young white-haired woman with curiosity. The woman next to the white-haired woman placed her sword against her shoulder. "I sincerely hope they resist, it helps to stretch my muscles a little," she said calmly, waving her sword slightly in preparation. "Give the order, Belfast." The girl now known as Belfast had her arm raised. She lowered it instantly, seeming to give the go-ahead or an order. "Attack." Likewise, several guards emerged from between magic circles, which appeared on the ground surrounding them, and the guards, with very resistant and crude armor at first glance, were already pointing their swords or spears at the necks of the 3. Kasuke started sweating profusely and crying in a comical way. "Wah. We're not going to die, wah, I don't want to die," he cried, throwing himself on the ground and rolling around. "This son of a bitch is going to kill all 3 of us together for his stupidity," the orange-haired man muttered under his breath. His mind was thinking a million things. He had to find someone so that they wouldn't cut their throats in that place. The guards' weapons and themselves began to freeze while the environment became twice as cold as before. "Please lower your weapons, this is abusive," called the voice of the queen, who was walking calmly towards the trio standing together in front of them. The young gray-haired guard became alarmed. "My lady. Step back, being so close can be dangerous," she said, putting herself on guard. "Stay away, my lady," exclaimed the white-haired woman with her gaze sharp and fixed on the 3 newcomers, having many magic circles around the newly arrived group. The queen shook her head simply, extending her hands, one of which she placed on Gabriel's cheek and her other on Ichigo's, caressing both young men lightly. "I knew it was you, I could never confuse you him." They are not a threat, they do not have control over magic, nor are they in a position to attack, exclaimed the beautiful woman, looking the two young men in the eyes. Ichigo had his eyes fixed on her, but not in a very friendly way. He was cautious and distrustful. We are harmless, at least I can say that we are not looking for trouble, even if it seems like it. Kasuke was hiding behind Ichigo and Gabriel. That what he said, he squealed as he covered himself with both of them. At least if something went wrong, he could run away faster than anyone could notice. The dark-haired man somewhat roughly removed the woman's hand from his cheek and quickly stepped back, very tense. He didn't trust, nor did he think he would trust, anyone, no matter how innocent or pure they looked. It wasn't something he liked, after all. The white-haired maid looking at that was about to activate one of the magic circles that was behind the jet black. The swordswoman next to her was equally alert, preparing her sword to finish off the three of them in the blink of an eye. The orange-haired man turned to see Gabriel before a tragedy happened. He quickly moved towards him, grabbing him by the collar of his shirt lightly with one hand and his shoulder with the other. His face was now completely serious and tense. Calm down, keep your nerves under control, it's not the best situation to play with them. Like you, they are twice as upset and they will kill us if you continue like this, he exclaimed in a low voice audible only to the two of them, but in a serious tone, or more like an order. On the other hand, the queen only raised her hand towards Belfast to stop their pursuit. She apparently knew who they were and would not allow them to be killed. The dark-haired man grabbed her arm, which was trembling, took a deep breath and bit his tongue, and managed to calm himself down and keep himself at bay while nodding slightly. For his part, Belfast slowly lowered his hand only because his queen had missed him with the gesture. Ichigo let out a pent-up sigh, lowering his head slightly. Look, I know what you're going through, believe me, I'm the same, but we have to stay calm if we want to live. Later we'll have time for you to be upset, sad, or whatever, but we still have to stay calm, okay? He said, raising his face again to see his friend with his frown in his eyes waiting for a sensible answer. The raven-haired man, looking around while paying attention to Ichigo, could only straighten up while crossing his arms and raising the collar of his coat while nodding with his mouth and half of his face covered, a sign that he would not say anything like that. He would only confirm or deny any questions they might ask him. Belfast saw her lady. She wanted to know what the queen was thinking now. Now my lady, can you explain to us what is happening? She questioned in search of a valid clue for what she was doing now. This isn't the right place, ahem. These two young men and their companion are now our guests, he said in a cordial manner, turning to look at the white-haired girl and the gray-haired girl. Please treat them well, give them new clothes, food, and then they will present themselves before me. Understood, Belfast. Jericho. The young gray-haired girl, now known as Jericho, just rolled her eyes and looked away, nodding. Fine, since she said with boredom she wanted blood or something like that, at least break an arm. Belfast nodded without refuting her lady's words. Your wish is my command, my lady, she would say somewhat reluctantly but elegantly, hiding her displeasure, bowing like a good maid. Likewise, the girl turned around, signaling to the door. Follow me this way, please, she would say, going ahead to guide them. Kasuke smiled stupidly. Oibo. Let's go. Let's go. People, he said, running like a kindergartner after the woman. Ichigo pinched the bridge of his nose in irritation, and because of this I'll end up 6 meters underground, he thought out loud, scratching his head as he walked behind the white-haired woman. The dark-haired man walked alone in silence, his gaze scanning the path they were being taken along, making a mental map in his head of the different corridors, visible structures, and other things in case they needed to escape. The young knight Jericho was following them closely as an escort. She still had the urge to cut off all three of their heads just for fun. Some time later. The trio had been locked in a room with clean clothes and already fed. They were just waiting for their audience with the queen, which would not be long in coming if everything went well, or so they hoped. Kasuke was in his new clothes, nothing special, just a white shirt with sleeves and simple black pants, along with some leather boots, accompanied by his bucket hat with white and green stripes. Okay, and now what is the plan to escape? He said in a chibi way. Yes, more or less like that, just without the leather vest. Thanks for your attention, keep reading D. The same for Gabriel and Ichigo, only without the ridiculous hat. The orange-haired man sighed calmly. Not so, I think you could see the powers of the white-haired girl, right? She alone is worrisome. There's also that knight who must undeniably be strong. With those two behind us, we wouldn't even get to the corner. I can't imagine the whole kingdom is looking for us. He answered. All this was giving him a migraine, rubbing his forehead. Now the only plan there is to meet with the queen and see if they let us free so we can leave. Gabriel, with his arms crossed leaning against a wall, exclaimed, from now on they are surely going to use us as some kind of tool. Didn't you see how she approached us? It is obvious that the queen knows what those two deities told us we were. Now we will have to wait, as you say, for the blessed meeting. He was just staring into space and without interest in anything either. Right now his mind was working to be able to see even a small window of probability to escape if necessary, obviously. Ichigo shook his head. Do you even realize our situation? We're already tools of those deities. I don't know what you're worried about. At least if it will give us food and a roof I wouldn't complain too much," he said seriously, releasing an irritated sigh. The door sounded again as the lock was opened, and it was the white-haired maid who opened the door, stepping aside to let the three prison pass. "Our queen called for you. Follow me please," she ordered with elegance and a neutral but authoritative look. "Okay, here we go," said the young orange-haired man more calmly than before. He left the room with the other two, waiting for the woman's guidance. So the white-haired girl led them through a couple of corridors, showing that the castle was bigger than it appeared, since it had several things to take into account, such as the gardens, the different training rooms, armories and other things. Gradually the group arrived at a huge wooden door which Belfast knocked on about 2 times, and then from behind a couple of knights in golden armor opened them on each side, standing firmly in their place. "My lady, here they are as you ordered," the maid would say with a bow again, and then step aside, leaving the three of them a full view of the large throne room, which had a long red carpet leading to the 2 thrones located there. "Welcome and I hope you have been treated well," said the queen looking at the younger duo. "I know you are alarmed and scared. I think what you have been through is no less young heroes, so let's start again. I am Queen Melinas III, and my dear husband, Ederbino VIII," exclaimed the beautiful woman in a tone that seemed to be maternal to them. Urahara was the first to jump forward, bowing heavily. "I am Kisuke Urahara. At your service," he said in a very bootlicking manner, something typical of him. Ichigo shook his head and let out a stifled sigh. The next step was, "Kurosaki Ichigo at your service, my queen," he said in a somewhat satirical tone, his eyes narrowed in a serious manner, while he expressed a not at all sincere smile. Gabriel Belmont, he would answer only his name in a neutral way, even covering his mouth and nose with the clothes he was wearing, leaving only his eyes visible. The ruler nodded calmly upon hearing their names. "It is a pleasure to meet you. Now I will answer your questions. You were summoned to this world to defeat the Demon King. It is a story that happened years ago. 2 brave heroes and their companion who saved this world," she said, pointing towards the roof of the castle, on which there were engravings highlighting the history of said heroes. Kisuke was now analytically looking at the engravings seriously. "It is understandable, although the letter is a kind of ancient Aramaic or something like that, but in general it is easy to understand. 2 heroes brought from a very far away place. They will walk between the 5 kingdoms, along with their companions that they will find in their adventures. They end the path in a great battle that will last 10 suns and 9 moons," he said, while taking out a pen and a small pocket notebook that he carried in his previous clothing, beginning to write down. The queen nodded with a lively but calm smile. "Indeed, you are the only one of the 5 kingdoms who has been able to read and understand exactly what is said in those engravings," the woman said in a cheerful tone. "Now it is clear, they are those heroes, although we only need one last proof," she said, and gestured to one of her servants. He nodded as he left the room, but it didn't take long when he returned with a cart and 2 weapons placed in display cases. He placed the cart in front of Ichigo and Gabriel, opening the display case and leaving. Ichigo observed the inside of it, sharpening his brow. His gaze quickly focused on a long katana of pure black color. Its guard was a kind of cross or something similar, and its handle was short like a hand, but covered by the black and red cross in its bases in diamond shapes, and at the end, a long chain of almost 1.5 meters. "It is striking." The jet-haired man, for his part, looked at the display case, his sight concentrating on a completely silver sword, the sword itself appearing to be thin but very long, the handle being joined to the long blade by a kind of unions similar to dragon scales. "How strange that sword, it's as if it were calling me," he thought, observing the weapon in detail. The queen shifted slightly in her seat upon seeing the reaction of both. "Go ahead, take them, they're yours if they accept them," she said, hoping for a favorable outcome. Kisuke, for his part, was somewhat jealous of both of them. He also wanted a weapon, but all he would get would be a piece of shit stuck on a stick. Any author's note. P.S. Making a little emphasis here, the scenes will be divided at least in the chapter of my Wapped, and that of my partner Gabriel you will see the points of view united, but when these 2 are separate the points of view will be divided. To see Gabriel's point of view you will have to go to your chapter in your account, and to see mine as Ichigo, only that he wants here and vice versa. That's all, thank you for your attention. https://www.wapped.com/user/GABRIELSALAZAR243 follow it. End of note. Ichigo sighed. He really wasn't paying attention to the woman. He had an analytical look, and being cautious he extended his hand, placing it on the handle of the same, squeezing lightly. "Good, so far nothing strange," the orange-haired man thought with some calm. "Of course, calm is the most important thing in this case," called a voice behind Ichigo, and everything around him began to lose color. Everyone around him was paused as if time had stopped. "Finally a new hero worthy of using my power. Yeah, you're not that bad. I hope you don't disappoint me, kid." In front of the orange-haired man there was a man of about 50 years old, almost 2 meters tall, with a black garment almost like a robe of darkness, and on his neck, a loose strip of white like the collar of a shirt. His eyes were being covered by semi-transparent glasses, his reddish-black hair down to his shoulders, and with his arms crossed behind his back. "Who are you?" the orange-haired boy asked, somewhat surprised but not alarmed. His presence was reassuring to the young man. "You won't tell me, will you?" The man just opened his mouth reciting something that couldn't be heard. "You could hear it. Couldn't you? You still can't hear my name. You're not ready yet then," he said, turning calmly and starting to walk towards nothingness, raising his right hand, snapping his fingers. Out of nowhere, as if time returned to normal, the grayish aspect of time disappeared, and out of nowhere Ichigo's arm along with the sword exploded into a reddish-black energy shooting all over the place, consuming Ichigo's arm as he knelt slightly. The wind whipped through the room violently from the power that was released, Ichigo squeezing his right arm, shocked by what was happening. "Shit," he growled, clenching his teeth and slightly lowering his head. That energy became more bestial. "What the hell is this?" he growled, being surrounded by that energy and exploding in it, being consumed by it. The young maid acting at the moment, making a movement with her hand which signaled the maids of the place to create a magic circle, each one activating a magic shield on each one of those present, especially for the queen, protecting them all from the great explosion of energy that came from both beings in front of them. The large cloud of dust had spread across the area, blocking the view of those present. Little by little, the dust began to clear, revealing both young men. On one side was the young orange-haired man, who had in his right hand holding the sword from that display case. His hand was covered by a black steel gauntlet like a claw holding the sword, which was attached to the gauntlet up to his shoulder in a black chain that had broken the entire sleeve of the shirt he was wearing, revealing a little more of his arm and some of his marked and muscular chest. "What the hell is going on in this crazy world?" he questioned, as if all this was crazy. Rolling his eyes and raising his right arm, he observed in detail how the chain was tied to his arms, as well as the gauntlet and the sword, which were still releasing a faint blue and red light, making the obsidian katana stand out a little more, leaving it sober and faint beauty. "Although I am not complaining, this doesn't look so bad, it looks curious." After the smoke cleared, he revealed himself to the raven, who was standing with his sword, or rather, saber, fully extended beside him, while his red eyes were flickering slightly, his expression a combination of seriousness and coldness combined. The long saber showed a slight shine on its blade, similar to that of a mirror reflecting sunlight. The royal woman's breathing had stopped for a few seconds as she looked at the two of them with excitement, relief, and gratitude for how strange it sounded. While on his other side, the king looked at them with annoyance, bitterness, and a great tone of hatred. "So they have finally appeared, they are damaging our lives again, ha," he muttered, clenching his fists in anger. Queen Melina stood up with a smile. "With this you have resolved all my doubts. These are the heroes that have been entrusted to us to help them develop their powers," she exclaimed, walking towards a window, breathing with relief. "Here in the Kingdom of Lions, there are many of the strongest adventurers or mercenaries that the 5 kingdoms have seen, just as many also open in the other kingdoms. This is the scale of their development. They will begin their training in lions. And they will be able to go in search of more and also earn a living as much as possible. Please, young Jericho, could you give them a simple explanation about the guilds and such?" he asked kindly without looking at her, while he admired his kingdom through that window. The young gray-haired girl nodded, turning to see the trio. "Well, since you won't be bucking kept men, you must work to get lodging, food, clothes, upgrades to your armor and weapons, or whatever you want, women, alcohol. By the way, Lions has one of the best wines you could wish for anyway. For this you must join one of the 10 guilds found in the city, to start at low ranks, and go on easy missions to earn money. Obviously the more jobs you do, the faster you can level up and earn more money. And I think that's it. The good lodgings are obviously somewhat expensive, and the cheapest ones are stables where you can sleep next to the horses, but at least you will have a roof because they are cheap," Jericho answered calmly, even with his hand resting on his sword, watching the duo with bloodlust. The raven-haired man was yawning while barely paying attention to what she said. "I only understood it works to swallow, and that's it," I would say, with great laziness and disinterest. It was something basic that someone with 3 fingers of forehead could have instantly intuited or deduced just by seeing at the time that all this was happening, adding apart the fact that magic can be used based on the magic circles that maid used. And speaking of the white-haired girl, she had a neutral look on her face, watching the trio, tensing her muscles in case they went too far, something Gabriel was doing and was about to do. On the other side was the young orange-haired man using Kisuk as a table, while he wrote things down in the yellow-haired man's notebook. "Okay, work for a place to stay. If I put Kisuk to work like a donkey, we can get easy money without much effort. Seeing that he was the idiot who contributed to bring us to this place, it will have to be of some use," he was muttering calmly. "I have it clear. Now we would need to get something more useful for work than these more common clothes," he said, while he saw how relatively that shirt he was wearing was no longer useful. The king, seeing this, cleared his throat. Ahem. You said it, young dirty pineapple head, you will need better equipment to start. I will give you a small budget to meet your needs, he said, scratching his white beard. Oh yes, little Jericho and little Belfast could accompany our guests to get what is needed, the old man ordered. Dirty pineapple told me. What funny is the king, Ichigo exclaimed in a low voice while having an irritated smile on his face. Belfast nodded to his king's words. Whatever my lord says, he responded in his typical professional and elegant tone without complaining. Jericho sighed bored, since it's not like I have anything better to do, she replied irritably. Disuke stood up excitedly. How great, we're going on an excursion, he said, turning towards the exit, still walking without any idea of where to go. And then I'm the one who gets lost, said the orange-haired boy with his eyes rolled back in his head, looking at Kisuke, turning to see Gabriel. I have a little curiosity about the guilds, don't you mind if we split up? Gabriel turned to see Ichigo. I was going to do the same, besides that, well, he answered, looking at Belfast, who still had her gaze fixed on him, as if she wanted to tear his head off with just a look. The old lady here wants to destroy me, and being around me will only make things worse for me. Besides, I don't want to be putting a harness on you like a baby. He exclaimed the last thing in bored chibi form, since he knew how airheaded Ichigo was when it came to getting lost. Ichigo smiled with amusement. It's not my fault that my sense of direction is bad, and I noticed that the maid wants to rip your head off a while ago. Take care, they say that it turns into love after a while, he said while laughing, putting his hands in his pockets. The orange-haired boy unconsciously released his grip on the sword, and for a moment it dematerialized into energy, leaving only the gauntlet in his hand. I knew I was going to have to carry this around with me forever, he said, but without paying any more attention, he just started walking towards the exit, hoping not to get lost. Hey, maid girl. Will you take me to a decent guild? I have a few questions. The maid nodding silently, but her murderous gaze passed to Ichigo, even though her expression remained the same serene as always. Belfast, and if what you say, sir. He spoke with a seemingly calm voice, but it had a dark and cold tone in between, something that was very well hidden. The orange-haired man smiled in a funny and annoyed way. Of course, Everina, and don't call me sir, you can call me whatever you want. The most common ones are Carrot King, or Orange Man, whatever you like, or invent something. The truth is it doesn't matter, he said calmly, putting his hands in his pockets. Belfast didn't pay much attention to what he had told her, she was only following the orders of her sovereigns, not his. Come this way sir, you're in luck, because the guilds are lacking members lately, and are accepting anyone who can grab a wooden knife. She would say while showing him the way to follow, she being the one who was at the head, being his guide. The orange-haired young man just shook his head. Sure, whatever you say, Mrs. Severina, he said neutrally as he walked. Oh, I have a question, is there also a library nearby? Or a place where there are a lot of books, he asked with a slightly more serious tone now. The same, nodding slightly as she continued walking towards the castle exit. The castle has the largest library in the entire kingdom. Everything can be said to be a collection of geography, history, magic and other things, all property of my lady. Ichigo nodded in understanding. Then I'll have to go there, he was now thinking out loud as he walked behind the woman. But while after so much walking and some long silence they had arrived at one of their first stops, one of the guilds that the white-haired girl had mentioned. This is the Lion's Fang. She clarified that most guilds in their name have the word Fang. Anyway, this is one of the most veteran when it comes to jobs and missions that have to do with domestic tasks, community services, social and from time to time more dangerous missions from rank B to A. Very rarely do they receive S-rank missions. This is the guild with the most members on the list, since they do not pose a great danger to the adventurers. The last thing she said sarcastically, since its members were more housewives, housemaids and other things. The orange-haired man just sighed with some regret. In any case, if my life didn't depend on the strength I need to obtain, I would have gone for the easy way and joined this guild, he said, scratching his head. I need one with a few more field missions. We still have 3 more guilds to visit, let's go see them, he would say, looking at a scroll that his queen gave him with the guilds that might be of interest to the newcomers. Some time later. The two of them were checking the next 2 guilds, which were practically the same only with a different type of shield. Right now they were going to the last guild. Okay, the last one on the list is called Moonfang, she would say, looking at the name with her eyebrow raised. This is one of the most destructive guilds in the kingdom, it barely has the right amount of members. Does my lady want to kill them? The white-haired girl thought curiously at her queen's suggestion written on paper. Ichigo turning slightly to see the white-haired girl, who was watching her with curiosity. Is something wrong, maid girl? Returning to reality, he noticed that they had already arrived. This is the last one, the Lunar Fang Guild, or as they like to call themselves, Fang that pierces the moon. This is one of the most destructive. Its missions range from rank B to SSS. Its most recent members are between 30 and 80 years old. The most veteran are those who take on more special missions, being those of royal or demonic rank. He described in detail, or as much as he could, of the guild in front of them, which was a huge building with an appearance similar to that of a castle. Ichigo thought for a moment and turned to see Belfast. Complex, it sounds interesting, not to say suicidal, but apparently it's what it is, he said with regret sighing. Well made girl, let's go in. Well, Belfast sighed slightly, walking to the entrance of the door. Once inside, members could be seen fighting each other like beasts. Tables, chairs, and beer mugs were flying everywhere, and there were also bodies flying like projectiles crashing into more drunks. "The curious play," said the orange-haired boy with his eyes rolled back, turning to see Belfast. "I'm sure we'll die before doing something heroic that makes it more fun," he said with an amused smile, walking through the war zone, dodging things with elegance. "Don't stay behind, maid girl." "She is," again in a heavy sigh she raised her hand, creating a kind of ice ball which she made explode in her hand, releasing a wave of ice which she trapped and froze everyone, sticking them to the floor of the wall like flies. "By order of Queen Melina's, I call before me the guild master now," the maid would say in an authoritarian tone without hesitating in her words. The fight stopped, turning to look at Belfast with their eyes rolled back, and they left the ice, remaining silent for a few seconds, and as if they hadn't cared a bit, they continued hitting each other like troglodytes. Ichigo was resisting laughing. Ahem. "I think it was worth a quintal of," he stopped because he was about to laugh out loud. Before anything bad could follow Ichigo's mockery, a powerful blow like that of a cane against the ground resonated throughout the place, alarming everyone present who quickly, as if by magic, were already sitting in their seats. "I apologize for the recklessness of these drunks," called a loud voice from the other side of the guild. Here you could see how an old man of perhaps 100 years old was coming down, hairless with a large bald spot, accompanied by a large X-shaped scar in the center of his head. Coming down you could see a long white beard tied in a purple ribbon, and he was wearing a kind of black combat kimono, along with a wide obi held by his shoulders. He was leaning on his cane. The orange-haired man was looking at the old man with curiosity. "I suppose he must be someone important to put everyone in order," he said while observing the entire guild, now in silence. "Thank you, Yamamoto Dono," she would say, relieved of not having to kill everyone present, turning to Ichigo. "Mr. Ichigo, this is Shijikuni Genryusai Yamamoto, the master of the Moonfang Guild," the maid would say, letting the master see Ichigo. "Yamamoto, that reminds me of an old war general from feudal Japan," he said, wandering off topic, but quickly returned to the present. "Ahem. I'm Kurosaki Ichigo, it's a pleasure to meet you." The old man opened his eyes slightly, looking at the boy in detail, approaching the two children. "Is there no need for so much courtesy, my children, little Belfast, that brings you here in detail?" he questioned without taking his eyes off the orange-haired young man. The maid took out the scroll that was given to her and handed it to Yamamoto. "My lady herself asked me to give Mr. Kurosaki a tour of the adventurer guilds that she herself suggested, but since all those that were crossed off that list were to his displeasure, we decided to go to your guild in search of someone who can accept you as a member, I would say in a polite and respectful manner to the master." Everyone started laughing as if what she was saying was a joke, throwing themselves on the floor laughing a lot. Others were already choking on their saliva from laughter. Old Yamamoto sighed irritably. Silence. He gave a loud shout that reached a tone of force almost impossible for a human. "As I was going to say, it is a complex request, miss," although he remained silent for a few seconds. "What do you think, Doko?" he questioned without taking his gaze off Ichigo. The man among the crowd, he looked to be 39, with long, messy chocolate brown hair down to his shoulders, dull brown eyes, a fairly defined and strong body. "If it's what I think, it could be useful for something," he exclaimed while analyzing the boy from head to toe. "Yes, it's him, there's no doubt about it," he exclaimed in his mind. Yamamoto nodded, turning to look at Ichigo. "Perfect, then you will be his teacher. I think you are the perfect one for this boy," said the old man, stroking his beard. Murmurs began to be heard among the people. "Master Doko, Royal Knight, one of the Queen's closest protectors, will finally have a disciple. Is that impossible?" many said, impressed. Ichigo was somewhat curious about what she was saying, sticking a little closer to Belfast. "Serious question, maid girl, what are the Royal Knights? I mean, I understand the term, but how powerful are they and what is their position?" "I didn't hear it well," he asked in a low voice. To summarize, they are the knights who are in charge of two important things: protecting the royal family and, in a possible future, fighting against the demon king if the situation arises. They are the elite of the knights, and very few reach that rank. It requires great power and also an enormous and unbreakable will, he murmured in response to Ichigo's question. Well, he watched Oko for a moment and then the teacher. "So can Mr. Kurosaki enter your guild?" Yamamoto nodded. "With Master Doko's guidance, he and his partner will be able to enter, of course, but I have another plan for him," he said, making it clear that he already knew about Gabriel without anyone mentioning it. Ichigo was now looking at him carefully and somewhat alertly. Before the man, in a certain sense Ichigo was someone distrustful who only knows how to act very well. "We never told him about it," he exclaimed in a serious, cautious and curious tone before that old man in front of him. The golden Saint Doko took a step forward. He had his arms crossed. The old man is a seer. He can see possible futures. He should have known about you two before you crossed that rift this morning. That's why I have no other option but to take you as my student Ichigo. We start tomorrow with your training, be punctual. He exclaimed in a neutral tone, although he wasn't very interested in being a teacher, and so he just turned around to go back to his thing. The elder nodded to them and turned around to return to his things. Tomorrow we will do your initiation and give you our mark. Try not to keep Doko waiting. He gets very angry when you take too long. Now the two young men were left alone, so to speak. Ichigo turned to look at Belfast. Do you know any place to eat? I'm starving, he said again in his calm tone. Belfast sighed as he looked at Ichigo. Upon returning to the castle you will be given a welcome meal, he said simply as his expressions turned to one of tiredness. The orange-haired boy saw the white-haired girl. You look tired because you're not returning to the castle. I think I might get lost alone. I still have something else to see, he said neutrally, putting his hands in his pockets to start walking towards some place he had in mind. I would do it and I wanted to do it, but they left me responsible for you, so whether I like it or not, I have to keep an eye on you, he exclaimed standing up as he walked with him, easily catching up. Ichigo, not paying attention to whether she was following him or not, was walking aimlessly with his hands in his pockets. After a long journey they were climbing towards one of the city walls. The orange-haired boy upon reaching the top was looking at the horizon where the sun was setting. He was silently watching the beautiful sunset from his position, at the same time his right hand, which was with a gauntlet towards his chest, taking a necklace in the shape of a five-pointed cross. He squeezed it lightly. His eyes were covered by his orange hair. I'll be back soon, little ones. I'll be back home soon and we'll eat the delicious curry, he said, while a solitary tear came out of one of his eyes. It was the first moment in which he was showing weakness without caring if someone was watching him. The white-haired girl barely heard what he said. She somehow missed the fact that they were brought here. That made her think that they had a life already made somewhere else, and that by coming here, there's no turning back. The orange-haired man sighed, wiping away the tear, returning to his usual neutral self, as if that moment had never happened. I have one more question, Belfast, he said, mentioning her name for the first time. The woman nodding as she looked at Ichigo curiously and sighed, knowing it would be something important. What's wrong? Let me know in the comments below if you guys want the next part. Also check out my other video that has been shown and left. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video please like and share this video. And have a fantastic day. Bye.